Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of The Last Raiders. Joining us today is one of my favorite faculty members, not just as a teacher, as a man, as a person who helped me become who I am today, and that would be Dr. Tyrone Robinson. Dr. Robinson, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Tyrone H. Robinson. I'm now a pastor of the First Community Baptist Church in White Plains. For the most part, I retired from the New York State Police, and I taught at Rice for 8 years before its closing in 2011. I think it was from 2003 to 11, and probably was the most enjoyable time of my my career, my working career. So
What brought you to Rice, Dr. Rob?
I knew where I was working. I was working in narcotics and not just street stuff that New York City does, but at a task force in actually the most elite task force in the country, which was located in the city. And I got to see the ravaging of what drugs did and all the likes. But one of the things I noticed is that the people who I was encountering, some of which looked like um, many of the population at Rice, but then there were others who I encountered who would have large quantities, as I say, and I'm not talking the street stuff that you see in New York, but large quantities. So I'm watching young men, mainly young men, get locked up, growing up from the streets, from getting drugs that could fit into the palm of your hands, and under the Rockefeller law, were getting 30 years in jail, which affected families, it affected communities, it affected lives. And while I'm doing the job that I'm doing, I saw the discrepancy in the treatment of different people by watching large quantities. We're getting warehouse fulls, tractor trailer loads, shipments coming in from planes. I mean, large stuff. And the people that we were arresting never saw a day in jail. So I'm saying something's wrong with this. So I started to feel very unfulfilled, knowing that drugs were a mission for all of my life, from what it's done to my community, even as personally in my family. I said, this is not working. I need to do something that can be more effective in helping to guide our young men, especially people of color, around this obstacle that's placed in our way. And I didn't know how I was going to go about doing it. And you remember Dean Ash, Tony Ash.
Yes.
He also worked with me with the state police, and I happened to retire. I didn't leave that job to come there. I just had enough of what I was seeing to say I need to do something else. And I spoke to him after I put my papers in, and he left the job, and he was actually a dean, not actually was a teacher at Rice. And he said, well, there's a position there. And one thing led to another. And Mr. Gober interviewed him. So he interviewed me. And then the next thing I know is I'm hired. The ironic part about that was Mr. Gober hired me, but I never worked a day for him because he was released before I started. But during the interview, one of the things that was very interesting to me that he kept saying was, because he said that, well, because he know I'm a minister. And he said, well, you're a Protestant minister. And I said, yes. And this is a Catholic school. Is that a problem for you? I'm like, no, it's not a problem for me. Is it a problem for you? So during our conversation, I must have kept bringing it up because I kept saying, you're not going to hire me, then fire me. So is this a problem for you? Because I'm not Catholic. So you have a Protestant teacher teaching in a Catholic school. But he says, no, I want you because you are what they need. I couldn't understand that at the time. And he kept saying that, no, you're what they need. No, you're what they need. It took about a year and a half before I finally figured out what that meant. And by that time, I was entrenched. I, just start developing relationships, and then it went on from there. But I'd rather than have me ramble. So if there's something more specific that you want, I mean, I could just ramble on for another 10 minutes because it was truly the best years of my life as far as my career goes.
That's I honestly I didn't even know that the process in itself was that arduous. I know generally in the Catholic school setting they try to have staff be of the Catholic faith or practicing Catholic, whatever the case may be. So the fact that you definitely made sure you went in there and you let them know, listen, this is who I am. I'm not changing that for you know just to walk in here and for you guys to then fire me. Oh my goodness. Give me 1 second. You know better than that. No, you know better than that. You know better than that. Please, you guys can close my. But I'm in the. Turn the Xbox off now. Turn the Xbox off now. I'm in the middle of a meeting and you guys both keep coming in here and you're being extremely rude. No, there's no but anything. I asked you guys not to come in here during my meeting. No, turn it off. Close my door. Thank you. Get out and close my door, please. If you want to play, then play. You're interrupting my meeting now. Close my door and don't come back in here until my meeting is finished. Close my door. Give me.
And healthy lads. See, wow, he grew a lot. Wow, that's
Yes, he will be 10 in September.
wow. He's
Austin,
grown quite a bit.
go go out there and close the door. Austin, go watch the TV in your room. You're not even supposed to be playing anything. You're on timeout. I'm giving you the privilege of playing. Stop interrupting my meeting, please. This is my everyday life. You
Welcome to the club. Yours is 10. I have a 7-year-old.
Yes.
So
Yes, but definitely. I know your history coming from the state troopers, coming from White Plains, and just the different stories you told us when we were at Rice. And it's just amazing to think that having a position where in narcotics you think that you can affect change essentially, and all the work you were doing, you were feeling like you weren't even scratching the surface. But then coming to Rice for those 8 years that you were with Rice, that's when you really started affecting change in the community as well as in all of our lives. I think that's very quintessential for what we talk about, the standpoint of Rice in and of itself, the effect of Rice and the effect of the people joining Rice, whether it be students or faculty. What was the most difficult part of the transition from going from law enforcement into education in that first year?
it really wasn't much of a transition because I had already committed myself to your people and young people. At my church, I was a youth minister. Even after starting working on a master's degree, from '96, while I was still working, and then after retiring, then went on to pursue a doctorate. I always had young people at my heart. I was the youth minister at my church for 16 years, much of which was after having a master's degree, and some of which was after having a doctorate. And people thought I was wasting my time there because they thought youth are where you start at, but not where you finish. And I'm like, no, they are wherever you are. They are the most important cargo that we have. And if we think that this is where you put people just to practice on, it was a mistake. So coming into Rice, I I always had a passion for young people, for children, babies, you name it. I've had over the years, I've had eight or nine, I lose count, godchildren, because I didn't, didn't get married young, I didn't have kids. So I I adopted you guys to some degree as being my kids, my children. And I watch you grow from children into fine young men, because my first teaching class was 15-year-olds. I did the sophomores. We did New Testament. And so I got to, and that's the fledgling, that's the hardest part of growing up, is right between 14 and 15, because you think you can go from 13 to adulthood, but those 5 years in between are the most consequential that you're going to have. And so here it is. I had a fight every day. It seemed like for the first 2 years of what I was going to put up, what I had to take, because you all had your own ideas, what you thought you were. You're grown, and but you have to endure that. And the one thing that I learned over the years is I'm not exactly how should I say, a pushover. I'm easygoing,
Far
but
from that.
I'm not gonna let a 15-year-old tell me how to do it. It just ain't gonna happen. And so but because I over the years, the easy part for me was developing relationships. The hard part was that I know that there are things that because of some of the histories that young men had, and which most of us have, um, that there were some things that they needed to overcome, and they needed to have somebody who was willing and able to stand up to them. Because if you're not going to be, if somebody can't stand up to you at 15, you're going to be locked up in some cell by the time you're 25 or dead. And so I went in with a mission, with a purpose that either y'all were going to break me, I was going to break y'all. And I had no intentions on losing. And so I went in with that thought. And having said that, now the statute of limitations is over, so there's nothing y'all can do to me. There were times, there were times I put hands on some of y'all because
I
that's what you needed.
I remember that.
And I never got in trouble. I never heard about it again. You know why? Because I developed relationship with y'all, and I knew that some of y'all needed this because some of you didn't have a strong hand at home coming from a male, a strong voice at home coming from a male, someone who grew up in a housing project. I remember when one of y'all sat down there, Dr. Rob, you talk like a white man. I said, well, what is that? Oh, yeah, you said this and that. And I said, so because I got some education, I sound like a white person. I said, see, that's the problem. You all think that being smart is something wrong with you, and that's a stigma that was put into you, and I have to get that out of you. And so I said, well, let me do this. And then I went pure Project Ghetto, and for like the next 30 seconds, I said, Dr. Rob, I didn't know you could speak like that. I said, son, I wasn't born this way. I developed because it was necessary. And this is the path that some of y'all are going to have to make too. You're going to have to learn how to talk two languages, the language that you were taught around the people that you know, and the one that you're going to be successful, that you're going to have to learn to get out of that which you're in, and then to go back and be able to speak to the language of the people who speak the other way so that you can help them to get out of some of the things that they're in. So I definitely had a plan, and it took a couple of years to put in place, but if I had done some of the things to some of the parents knew some of the things, I cuffed some of y'all up and I grabbed had a couple of judo, some of y'all, but you have an idea. But it wasn't to show dominance, it was to show you that you can't just do what you want for free and think nothing's going to have a consequence, not going to have a consequence for it. And so I know I got away with stuff I probably shouldn't have done. But because I developed relationships with it, it never ever came back on me. Never, never,
No,
not one time.
and it's so funny you say that because one of my one of my memories, one of the first memories was after parent teachers well, during parent teachers conference where you and my parents just magically hit it off immediately, and I was just like,
Oh,
oh.
I love your folks. Oh, they say, oh yeah, you got Dr. Rob. Good, good. I like him. I like y'all too because they came. And the difference between your parents is that they both came.
Yes, both
See,
of my parents
most
came.
of 90% of the conferences, and this led to part of the problem, is that it was, if someone came at all, it was always the mother or grandmother, depending on the situation. And in itself, that doesn't seem like a problem because mothers have been doing a wonderful job. I tell you, if you listen to me talk, that on the back of Black women, especially Black women, for 403, 402 years, they're the ones who made America what it is. Without Black women, America wouldn't be. They're the ones that held the country together. They're the ones who held our families together. So, but you all need to have someone who you can't, because boys manipulate mothers. That's what they do. I see my son. My son manipulates my wife. That's what they do. So every once in a while, he needs to have a hand that's going to be a strong hand that's going to stand up to him, that loves him, but is going to make sure that you don't think that because mommy's around that you can get what you want and do what you want and mommy will fix it. No, there's some consequences that you need to learn about. Daddy going to teach you, not mom, because mom is going to make a deal with you. Daddy, there's certain things that we ain't making a deal.
No,
So
absolutely. And it's crucial, like you said, to have that strong hand. And I was fortunate to have my father at home, I had my father my entire life. There was never a day where I was ever worried that my father wouldn't be home. So I had that at home, but I think the main thing that I needed was that hand outside of the home. And it's not that I was a troubled kid or anything like that, but I think at a time, especially at that age, 13, 14, 15, you can be easily manipulated. You can be easily coerced into going down a path that you shouldn't be going down. And I'm not saying that
Absolutely.
I was uh I was susceptible to that. I'm not saying that I wasn't either.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Having that strong voice, at times, you let us joke within reason. You let us cut up within reason. And I remember after that first parent teachers conference, I think it was in the same week, there was a point where I was walking down the hall screaming and I had my back turned and all I felt was a hand on the back of my head. And as soon as I felt it, I knew exactly who it was. And
So was it me?
it was you. You were standing right behind me, and you were like, "Shaq, do I have to call your father?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." And it wasn't an issue again. And and I say that to say it wasn't the fact that you put your hand on. It was the presence. I felt the presence. I felt it. And it was as if my father was with me in school. And I think that was so key to me wanting to stay out of trouble as well as wanting to excel and be successful. And it just showed every day between you and Dean Ash the level of care. Mr. Shea, Brother Sherlock, so many of you all just providing that impetus for us to want to grow up to be young men, to make it out of these communities, show everybody outside of our communities that we're more than just what statistics say, that we're more than just what news headlines say, we're more than just what you read about on social media, what you assume for us to be because we come up in these neighborhoods. And that's one of the things that I've always thanked you for. Always thanked you for. I don't get a chance to tell you as often as I should, but I truly, truly appreciate everything because you especially were one of the biggest contributors. Literally one of the biggest contributors to who I am. Now, of course, I blame my parents because they had a big hand in it, but it's always the outside forces that kind of nudge you along in the right direction as well to keep you on that path that your parents kind of groom you into. But those outside forces, those outside influences can either sway you away from those or keep you on that path.
Yeah.
And you was
Those
that.
things are around you, those temptations, and growing up in an urban setting, you are exposed to a whole lot more than a lot of others are. And some people make that a negative, but the people who get through it should make you stronger because you've been through some stuff and you have navigated. But over my years, I got to laugh with, I got to see, got to cry with a couple of you. I had big people who taller and bigger than I was come to my class and crying on my shoulders. I mean, things that you just don't think happen, with young guys because we have to play the game. I mean, I grew up too. You have to play that role. You have to be a little tough. You have to be a little hard to make it through. But at the same time, one of the words you use that is, which is so important, is about you just need to have somebody who care enough that can take you through all of those stages, the grief, the happy, the joy, and the ups and downs. And the one expression that my motto, even to this day, when it comes to rice, I learned an expression and I never forgot it. And I use this whenever I think about y'all because it reminded me of of it reminded me of the relationship, and it went like this: they don't care that you know, they want to know that you care. They don't care that you know, they want to know that you care. And once I showed you that, that's why I could grab some of you. That's why I could cuff some of you. And that's why when you even decided to go off on me, that even Dean Ash would say to me, he says, "You don't send none of your kids down to think you're not having any problems." I said, "Oh, I have trouble with them." I said, "But I'm a grown man." I wasn't gonna say it like I normally said it to him, but I'm a grown man. I don't send my problems to other people. I deal with my issues. So when you could count on, in my 8 years, you could count on one hand how many people I sent to the dean. You can count. because I dealt with you myself. And there was a couple of who were a little more on the side. The only time I would send you to the dean, if I know that today for me wasn't a good day. So rather than me take out my day on you, I said, you better go down there. And he would come to me, or Tony, I said, Dean Ash, he would come to me and say, oh, you said, what's his name down there? He give you that much trouble? I said, no, Tony, I just couldn't deal with him today. So I figured you better handle him today. and so, but we had that kind of relationship because I did not send my problems down for somebody else to deal with. No, you're going to stay your behind in this classroom and get what you should be getting because you can't get it from down there. And they didn't understand that. I mean, I say you all didn't understand it, I'm sure, at the time, but I'm not kicking you out of class because this is where you need to be, whether you want to be here or not. But you're not going to sit down there and just be a clown and go down to the dean and sit down and then sit after school for a half hour, 45 minutes, however long you had to sit there. I say, you're really wasting your time that you'll do this stupid thing that you know you're going to have to sit there and give up an afternoon for an hour just to do what? To show what? That you're a clown. Now you have to pay the price. Well, now you know everything you do comes with a consequence. But I'm not going to send you down. I'm going to deal with you myself.
I think that was the most important thing, having those consequences, having those limits set, having those boundaries set, because a lot of us at Rice come from public schools. Now, me personally, I've been in private school most of my life, but um, from some of my cohorts, telling me, "Oh, we come from public school where a lot of times you just get passed along to the next teacher, you get passed along to the next grade, passed along to the next class," and it's like you're not and kids take that in, they feel that, and essentially they just feel like it's somebody passing the buck, like they don't care. So when you step into an institution like Rice where you have teachers like yourself, Dean Ash, Brother Sherlock, the list goes on, where no, I'm not gonna just send you out of class because that's the easy thing to do. And we did have teachers like that who just sent students out of class. um but it was who the teachers who I saw affect the most change in students were the ones who didn't just send kids out of class, like yourself. The teachers who, after class ended, said, "Hey, listen, talk to me for a few minutes, or come see me after school." And it wasn't to keep us for a half an hour for detention. It was just to check in with us, do a temperature check. Hey, how's everything going? You don't normally act like
Mhm.
this. Is everything okay at home? Do you need any assistance with anything? Do you want to just get something off your chest? And I've seen, like you said, some of these tough guys in school break down like babies, and it's okay. It's perfectly fine because we built ourselves up with this tough exterior that we feel we have to have when we step into the outside world. That we have to be covered in this suit of armor and not let people in, because if we let people in, we feel like it shows weakness. If we show weakness, we feel like we fail. If we feel like we fail, we feel like we collapse in the community. But when you stepped into Rice, it was okay to take that armor off, be vulnerable.
Mhm.
You all showed us that vulnerability is not weakness. That's one of the strongest things you can have. There's nothing wrong with expressing yourself in the correct manner. There's nothing wrong with being vocal about how you're feeling.
Nope.
And a lot of
And I,
people adapted that, and it changed their whole trajectory in life. And I'm a witness. At 4 years at Rice, I saw some of the hardest exterior people become young men and change their whole trajectory.
well, if you now, because of things like social media, like Facebook, I get to see some of the success stories, and it's quite a bit because when you look at the numbers for New York City at the time, I don't know what they are now, but I can tell you what it was when then. The minority male, Latinos, Black males, the graduation rate, especially the graduation for them to graduate on time, it was under 30%, which is absurd. I come from White Plains. That number just doesn't exist. And when you talk about Rice, the number of graduating and those who are prepared and eligible, not everybody went, but those who were eligible to go to school was almost 100%. Even some of the troubled ones were prepared that they academically could have gone on to college. So and that's because you have people around you who care. And like like what I found out is in my 8 years, to some degree or another, there's only one student that I felt like I failed, and he was on a mission to self-destruction, and there was nothing you could do about it. But I felt like I could, and then I lost contact with him. And one day he used to come to my room and talk to me, and we talked. And then one day he just stopped coming. And then we got into a thing in a hallway because he was going after one of the female staff. And I said, "You man, you can't do that." And he cussed me out. "You mind your business. This ain't about you, Rob." And such and such. I said, "But you come to my office. You want to come and talk? No, no. Is she gonna do something?" So, and he wrote. I said, "No, we're not allowing that here." And so he got at me like he was going to do damage. And later on, I found out some of the things he got into. He very well could have done that to me, but I wasn't going to back down because it is what I stood for. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And so I have a purpose. I came there with that purpose. And he could have done me harm, but I wasn't going to back down. And then I reached out for him um, some time later because I looked him in the system and I couldn't find him, and I didn't know where he was. I heard, that he was incarcerated, and then I found out that he was doing, a time in jail. So when he got out, I still tried. And then one day it was on Facebook. I just out of the blue asked. I said, I'm trying to get in contact with this one here. And he said, "Yo, Rob, you don't know?" He said, "I'm a down message you." And he down messaged me. He said, "Oh man, he got killed last week." And that hurt me to my core because I still felt, even after having been out of Rice for, at the time, probably 7 years, I still felt like I could make a difference with him. But he was on a mission of self-destruction. You really can't stop anybody who has their goal on to be on that lane where they're going to self-destruct. If somebody wants to do it, they're going to do it. But just what you just said, at least if you had a voice, somebody else who can help to steer you, maybe it makes a difference. But if it doesn't, well, there's nothing you can do. But at least you got to put your best effort forward. So that was the only one that I for sure that I felt like I didn't do enough. And he's 20 something years old, and he's in a grave, been in jail. That just it just everything that I hated about what somebody could turn into, he turned into, and it hurt me. It hurt me real bad. It really did. But for the one, I would say not success stories. There are 1,000 of you who did well, and there are hundreds at the very least who are doing very well. I well, you won't know this, but you brought tears to my eyes when you asked me to marry you. I couldn't believe it. I said, somebody said later on, I said, I just got an honor. He said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "We were out of school now. What year did you, it was 11? Did you stay to end? What year did you leave?"
I graduated 11. We were the last class.
Okay,
So
you were the last class. All right. So you got married in 17,
yes,
16,
sir.
17.
16,
Uh-huh.
16, I believe it is. Yeah, it'll be
Well,
six
and I
years in
and I
July.
told the story. I said one of my students just called me. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. He looked me up. He found me on Facebook, and he said, I haven't considered anybody else. I told my fiance, and he said, "It's all right with you. I know who I want if he can." He says, "Is that all right with you?" She said, "Yeah." And he said, I'm asking you, will you marry us?" I I was I was honored. I was touched because that made my stay at Rice and let me know that I had some effectiveness to at least with one, if nobody else would want. And it really propelled me even forward now. Now I'm a pastor. Now I have to look out for people in general. But if you people like you prepared me to let you know that you just have to give and you have to look at the success stories and feel that you are just a part of it, and that's why you're here. If you're not here to help others, then your time here is in vain. And so that's what's about. So I appreciate that you asked me, that you even remember me, that you even put the effort forward to find me.
Uh, I mean, you're welcome, but I have to thank you because I like I said, I can't say it enough. The uh, the change you affected in me, the effort that you put in with me, as well as my classmates. Many of my classmates, we still talk. We talk about you. We talk about Dean. We talk about all of you still. Even over 10 plus years later, and uh, it. like I told you when I first called you to ask you to marry us, there was no hesitation. We were going through we were going through all the details, and initially we were like, oh, we'll go to the justice of peace, and then we decided, you know what, let's have an actual ceremony, and then uh, the wedding planners were like, oh yeah, we can hire an officiant for you. I said no. I said I have somebody who will do it, and if he says yes, that's who's doing it for me. So I went over with my wife Shayna, and she was like, I love that idea. Your teacher from high school, he's qualified to do it. She was like, if he says yes, absolutely. And then you honored me by saying yes. So we still look at the pictures now. I seeing you standing there, it's just surreal to me that having you there at two huge moments of my life. One was graduating from high school, and the second was the day that I was able to become a husband. And it's it's just a testament. I don't know what else to say, and I'm trying not to get too emotional. But
Well,
it just you don't come across a lot of people like that, especially as a young man coming from the communities that we come from. You don't get those types of people in your life that stick around for a really long time, always. And I made it a point to try to keep those people close to me once I come across them, because I'm a firm believer in people coming along in your life for a reason, and that they're supposed to be there. People who are supposed to be in your life will always find a way to be in your life, and people who aren't will always find a way not to be. And you were one of those people who found a way to be in my life, even after graduating from Rice. So the thanks goes to you. I still thank you. Obviously, God has the plan, has the mission, has the vision, and puts everything together. And things are written in stone before we even get there. So we're already in the book. We just haven't gotten to the chapter yet.
yeah, and that's exactly right. And y'all do, even when I'm not in direct contact, I'm watching success stories. And one of the things we taught you was about an entrepreneur. I don't know if you remember the lesson I taught you about the fish tank. And I'm watching some of you become entrepreneurs of the industry, and you're doing very well. And that just does my heart so good. I tell my wife, I said, this one here now is a lawyer. This one here has his own business. This one here makes cakes. I mean, it's just some of the things. It's just amazing with some of the variety that we've come across. And I said, but just have a little bit. I said, just have a little input, and that's all it takes. Because if everybody who you come in contact with just give you a little bit, then that's all it takes. Because a little bit makes much. It builds up. But the only thing that y'all have to learn, and if I didn't stress this enough, I stress it to you now, is that you share with someone else. That you remember what you got, and you remember what worked for you. You make sure that you help the next one who comes along. They're not going to be perfect. They're going to have some spots and blemishes and wrinkles and all of this other stuff, or warts, as some would say. But don't not help them because of who they are, because some of them just needs to have a strong hand in their life to help him get through some of those imperfections. And so that's why, as a father, you know, that's why I laughed at you just now. You see your boys coming there doing what they do. You have two, I have one, but they're boys. They're doing what boys do, and that's why they need you. They need you to help to guide them, to shape, what they do, what they become. You're a major part of that. And once you understand that, a part of what I gave to you, you pass on to them. A part of what your father gave to you, you pass on to them. That's success. So
Absolutely. It's been a whirlwind.
spiritual, the demon saw fit to close that was successful because it had an agenda. Huh?
Uh,
They had an agenda, and
yeah.
and they closed it, and God forbid, but they knew what they were doing.
And I guess that goes into the last thing I wanted to ask you, because Zoom has a time limit. So, but in that final year of Rice, obviously there were things that we didn't know as students. There were things that you did know as faculty. Well, take me through those final moments for you, because I know what it was like for us. I know what it's like for me. personally. Even though I was graduating, it still broke my heart to know that there's many generations who won't have this.
I I I had to, deal with not turning bitter um, to the archdiocese. Now I'm not Catholic, and they probably wouldn't notice nor would they care. But I knew when they sent that the principal, the one who became, they didn't call him a principal anymore. What did they call her? Whatever the new title became, that the word had already gotten out. When they send her, she is the one who they send to close it down because she's heart has a heart of stone. She doesn't really care about the people. She has no relationships with any of the faculty, none with the students. And so her mission there was to just get it closed down at any and all costs without becoming emotionally attached. But because you should treat it absolute best and not have to consider that you would be the last. Um, of the just because of how things turned out, it really hurt me that they did this because success. You talk about 98% of the kids go to college or eligible in New York City, whereas the under 30. Think about that numbers 3x better than the average, the city average, 3x better than the city average. That's unheard of. So I had to focus on y'all and not on what they sent over.
Yeah, that was, and I think it took me a long time to get to that point. Uh, After graduating, I had to think about it, and not from a standpoint of, well, they're going to be sorry that they did this and that and the third, but more of the impact that was had. You know, you can't walk through Harlem without people mentioning Rice High School. You can't walk throughout New York City. It doesn't matter where you go in New York City. Rice has been closed for over 10 years, and people still talk about Rice, and not just for its athletic program, which is what Rice was known for. You're not just for the basketball team. People talk about the effect that Rice had in the community, whether it was